Breaking right now, a new bloodbath at GB News. Just days after woke ITV slashed a whole load of programming and presenters as the mainstream media continues in its death spiral, same thing has happened at the news station, of which I used to be a part, of course. So let me take you through this story, reveal why it's happened and what is really going on. So, yesterday, a whole load of GB News presenters, predominantly those who work on the 11 p.m. show Headliners, were called into a meeting and told that their show was going to be axed within 2 weeks. Its replacement will be an extended version of the show that I used to present, hosted by Patrick Christys and Ben Leo. So that means a whole load of GB News presenters will be losing their jobs, including Josh Howie, Simon Evans, Leo Kearse, Archie Manners, Nick Dixon, and Cressida Wetton. Now, obviously, it's always horrible when people like that do lose their jobs, but it does spark bigger questions about what is going on at GB News and whether they have a model in which they can survive. Because trust me, when I started broadcasting on that channel, I was on between 9 p.m. and midnight. And I'm a hard worker, right? Like, I'm not afraid of hard work. I was doing it 5 days a week. But fundamentally, it was just impossible to produce a show for that length of time and keep it at a particular quality. Now, what I know has been going on behind the scenes is that the man who replaced me, Patrick Christys, has been lobbying very, very hard in order to take on this extra hour, because for him, he thinks it's more time on air. He's able to increase his massive salary. But actually, he's making such a big mistake, because not only is he yet again screwing over a whole load of colleagues, but he's also actually doing himself a disservice, because no 3-hour show in prime time can be must watch. Now, at the same time, GB News insiders say that Headliners has been struggling for months as a result of its difficulty between trying to, I guess, deal with that mix of the comedy and the news every night. And it had in recent months, since Josh Howie took over from Andrew Doyle as the main presenter, become known for its uncomfortable on-air rows between its presenters. So we're going to get analysis from our superstar panel, Lois Perry and Russell Quirk, in just one moment. But first, have a look at what I'm talking about.
Saying that we should get rid of all money for pensioners for the winter fuel allowance, and then the Prime Minister said we're actually going to go back on that. You would consider that
okay, well, that's an excessive interpretation of what actually happened. And I also would say that this isn't necessarily a U-turn. What he's saying is, I'm just trying to be fair here, like, he's just saying he's going to make the fuel money available to more pensioners. That's all.
He is saying
more eligible.
He is saying that, but it hasn't been in the budget. He's like sort of made this promise, and that's what Labour does. They're like liars.
Are you suggesting that politicians sometimes don't stick to their word?
I'm saying that the Labour politicians, and especially now that they're so low in the approval ratings, they're doing anything.
They can do anything.
They can,
even trying to sort of heat up old people.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things, because
it's a lose-lose situation.
Well, let me ask you, Adam, and then I'll ask you exactly the same question, if you don't mind, Lewis. Off your phone, please. Who's texting you?
My son is texting me.
Oh, what's he saying?
He's saying, really good show.
We're not into it yet.
He's saying, good show. Throw it at that guy, and that guy is you.
Oh, throw what at me?
Is not let you cut me off.
Oh, fair enough. No, I thank you very much. Please, okay.
So look, I think it's fair to say that it certainly hasn't been a happy shift at Headliners for a number of months. But what is interesting, I think, to me, is that GB News tries to paint itself as a family where people look after each other. But actually, it's a nest of vipers where presenters like Patrick Christys do whatever they can to throw other presenters under the bus. That's not nice. That's not a family situation at all. And I think, well, look, I'll come to him in a little bit. But look, this is a big loss of talent. I mean, certainly Russell Quirk. There are some real stars on that show. I mean, I would say Nick Dixon and Leo Kearse in particular have been absolute favourites on that channel. And just axing a show like that to replace it with another hour of a show that's already on seems to be very much what happened at ITV earlier in the week. These mainstream media organizations are having to do a lot more with much fewer resources.
Well, I guess extending Patrick Christys' show makes some sense on the basis I think Patrick Christys is probably the best presenter on that channel, frankly. So extending his show by another hour with his understudy Ben Leo, you can see why they're doing that in terms of trying to retain the audience that no doubt drops off after Patrick finishes and when headliner starts. I think the problem is, I don't want to be too unkind here, but I just don't find the headliners panelists funny. I mean, I know they're comedians. And here's the thing, Dan and Lois, what is it about Britain and British broadcasting where we cannot seem to combine kind of comedy and politics when it comes to chat? So I know we're famous for the likes of Spitting Image and, have I got the, back in the day, not that I know news for you, have I got news for you and so on. But in the US, you can think of Jimmy Kimmel, John Oliver, Bill Maher, and so on, that do that combination of political chat and comedy very, very well indeed. We don't seem to have been able to crack that.
Well, Greg Gutfeld has become like a massive star on Fox News in the US for doing that from the right, hasn't he? Lois Perry, what do you make?
But then they don't have to worry about Ofcom, Dan.
No, they don't. What do you make of this decision, Lois?
Well, I mean, you're saying we're not very good at combining politics and comedy. I think I'm in a parallel universe. I mean, most of the shows that I've absolutely loved growing up, I mean, obviously, if you're speaking right now, then I must say that I do agree with you. But, historically, yes, Prime Minister, yes, Minister.
No, I mean political chat, Lois. I don't mean set piece.
Have I got news for you, which is not my cup of tea politically, but it's funny.
Yeah, the thick of it was very,
be.
very good. It's 20th anniversary. But Russell, you're talking about actual panel shows that tackle the news rather than fiction, right?
Daily stuff. So Question Time, Peston, Newsnight, and so on, which definitely are not comedy programs. Sometimes you do laugh at them, but maybe
for all the wrong reasons.
For the right reasons.
We do that, whereas the Americans poke fun very, very well and very convincingly by combining panel shows and chat on a nightly basis with comedy. I'm not talking about set piece sitcom stuff. I think
I must say I do agree with you on that, but it is a shame that is the case now, because actually, I just feel people feel that they're not allowed to say certain things, and obviously on MSM, especially the work of MSM, which is 99.9% of it, they're not allowed to make any jokes whatsoever. I mean, I didn't realise, but I've been watching quite a lot of Have I Got News for You. I've been staying with my nan actually a couple of days, and she likes Have I Got News for You. How obsessed they are with the Reform Party and Brexit, and if they didn't have Farage, Reform, Brexit, and in the past Boris, people like that to take the mickey out of, they wouldn't really have any content.
But Lois, here's the
whatsoever.
thing: they only ever rinse the right. They don't take the rise out of the left, do they? And that's why they get away with it, because of course it's produced by the BBC, which is
that's why it's a shame that this one hasn't worked out for GB News. I must say I never found it particularly funny. But I've just got a text coming in from my daughter. No, I haven't.
Get off your phone! Get off your phone, Lois. There's no love lost between those two. But look, I've found an example, I think, Russell, of what you're talking about, which is that real difficulty that the show struggled with in terms of how do you combine comedy with very serious breaking news. Watch this.
But yes, and there's a picture on the front there of children. It's heartbreaking. I will say I've also seen plenty of footage, fake footage online of very similar things of children seemingly screaming for food, and then you see actually that someone in the background is actually laughing. They stuff out. I'm not saying this particular image is.
I've seen fake footage of the fake footage where you have the children screaming for food, then the person laughing, and then there's an Israeli cameraman taking them, directing them. Okay, I'm lying about that.
Yeah, no, the cameraman, as the recent thing I put online was, turned out he was like a beast. This Palestinian obese cameraman is the guy shooting these supposedly starving kids. It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Ask
what?
Aideen what she thinks.
No, I don't. I want to move on. We've got some really good stories I want to get.
awkward, Russell.
Yeah. There is a show, by the way.
is
You
there?
might not want me to do this, Dan, but Talk's Plank of the Week on YouTube. I mean,
No, I love
have
it.
to say, that is a very, very well conceived, well hosted show, which I happen to be on a regular basis. Plank of the Week, I think, is one of the best shows, genuinely, that combines politics of the hour, of the day, with comedy.
No, do you know what? I absolutely love it. And it's interesting to me because, of course, we've had this big revolution in the media, and both GB News and Talk TV, I think, in a way, failed as 24/7 news outfits. Of course, GB News had much more success than Talk. But what's interesting, I think, is that if Talk leans in to the independent space, the YouTube space, that's where it has success. I mean, I think Mike Graham in the mornings is absolutely brilliant. Plank of the Week is like the huge, big success flagship of that network. But what's interesting, Lois, of course, is that GB News has made a decision to commit to linear television. And I think that's going to be very difficult. So even though they are deciding, well, let's just supersize all of our shows, actually that doesn't really work. Trust me, it doesn't work, because obviously I was hosting that show for 3 hours a night. People are never going to, people at night, people want something that's appointment to view. And if you're on for 3 hours, you're just not. You can't do your top job at that time. Now, Patrick Christys is a guy who just wants to be on TV at any cost, but someone sometimes actually needs to say, no, less is more. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And for good reason, given the ongoing debates over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other anti-establishment politicians are portrayed. But I have the solution for you. It is called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. This has been a game changer for a news junkie like me. You can see it for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's look at the decision recently by the UK Supreme Court that ruled that women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. You can see clearly in one place that over 350 sources around the world are covering this story. Ground News instantly shows how the story is being covered by the media, broken down by whether it leans left or right, illustrated by its bias distribution chart. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So we can see clearly for ourselves that on the right, the Daily Wire covered the case very accurately with the headline, UK Supreme Court rules trans-identifying men are not women. Spiked Online was even more forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. And the Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists, and the Canary ran with the clearly ludicrous headline, victory for the far right, as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. Far right? Try calling J.K. Rowling that to her face. My favourite feature is their blind spot feed, which services upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. If you love the news like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. So go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code to subscribe today. Get 40% off the same Vantage plan I use for unlimited access. That's ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
I like Patrick, so don't make me be mean about
No,
Patrick.
you don't have to be. I'm not asking anyone. I'm just honest.
I do agree with what you're saying, though, about breaking up the content, not just for the presenter and for the producers, but also for the public. And it is a shame that they haven't been able to find a format that combines politics and comedy. I do get that. Just doing a little bit of a Russell, I had a show, it was Andre Walker's show, and it was called That Was the Woke That Was, and that ran for quite a long time and was successful both online and on YouTube for Talk TV. But unfortunately, a decision was made not to continue with that. So but it is possible to combine politics and comedy. It's done in America. We've done it successfully before in this country. So, but I do agree with you that having big chunks of time would be very, very challenging. And obviously, you, Dan, have got the experience that I haven't to comment on that.
Well, look, I just think I'm going to be honest about my experience. That is the reality. And not everyone's going to like
terrible.
that.
My God, Patrick's hair's improved, isn't it, over the last 3 or 4 years?
And the thing is, not everyone is going to like that degree of honesty. But if you speak to Mark Stein, if you speak to Father Calvin Robinson, if you speak to Lawrence Fox, and I was on the Mark Stein cruise with them very recently.
I'm not talking to Lawrence, actually. I talked to the other two.
Yeah, speak to the other two. And actually, let me tell you, my exclusive interview with Mark Stein is coming to be released very, very shortly on my Substack, www.outspoken.live. Please do sign up. That is the best way to protect me from big tech cancellation. And Mark Stein actually said that he believes GB News was trying to kill him during his departure from the station. So unfortunately, Russell, and I understand that for both of you, GB News is probably an important part of this right-wing media ecosphere, so people have to be careful. But there is a long list now of very, very good people, from Alex Phillips to Colin Brazier, who have been, to Isabel Webster, to Mark Dolan, who have been treated utterly appallingly by that network. And at some point, I'm sorry, you've got to call out that actually they're not a family, they're a very brutal enterprise. And that's the point that I'm trying to make about the way that these headliners have been treated.
Well, I think what we need to understand is that, all of the ideology in the world is wonderful. And seeing centre-right broadcast stations in this country is a breath of fresh air, whether it's Talk, GB News, or indeed independent media like yourself. But I'm afraid when it comes down to the overheads that the likes of GB News in particular have by being on terrestrial telly and having the studios and the staff and so on they have, what then has to come first is the commercial imperative. And again, I'm going to do another John Sopel here. Is it the fact that sometimes these well-meaning centre-right ideology stations, do then creep very slightly back towards the centre if they are concerned about either an exodus of advertisers, lack of advertisers, and indeed that Ofcom specs. That's what happened.
They absolutely do. And look, it was interesting because we just saw Dominic Frisby on screen. He was one of the original co-hosts of Headlines, and this isn't really talked about, but he was the first free speech victim of GB News. He made a joke that was considered anti-Semitic. It wasn't, like Dominic Frisby is the least anti-Semitic person in the world. And he was the first presenter who was just chucked under the bus. And of course, Mark Stein would follow, I would follow, Lawrence Fox would follow, Calvin Robinson would follow. So I would be much happier if GB News Lois was prepared to say that they're not a free speech station. They're not able to be a free speech station because they have to work within the confines of the off-communists.
I must admit, and I very sadly, Mark had his first heart attack while he was on air with me. I was on GB News.
Lois,
and
I know you've made a few famous men's heart flutter, but that is so bloody ridiculous.
And broken a few.
No, I didn't do anything. It wasn't my fault. Everyone says that. Anyway, so he says, that happened, and he gave me a weekly slot called Perry's Perspective, which was wonderful, and I was able to break lots of stories to do with net zero, the ultra low emission zones story, and the 15 minutes and all the cities and all of that. I was able to use that time to break stories that I may not have been able to get through. And I must say, Mark's bravery with me, allowing me to talk about certain things that were happening in the name of net zero, but were actually, you say off communists, were actual communism, using net zero as the horse of Troy. I actually believe that if he hadn't have done that and wasn't as brave as he was, I would have been able to push out these narratives that are now completely mainstream. So I'll always be very grateful to him for that, always.
Honestly, look at the issues that Mark Stein championed on GB News and was thrown to the wolves as a result. Nut Zero, as you point about, the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs and the vaccine. And it's like, come on, he was on the right side of history. GB News was on the wrong side of history for not supporting him. And certainly in my case, of course they were on the wrong side of history. You should never throw a presenter under the bus for tittering at something that another presenter says. But anyway, I won't get into that now because I want to ask you about Eamon Holmes. Lots of concern for him this week after there was this really dramatic piece of television. In case you haven't seen it yet, this is what happened.
Nationalisation needs to come in.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, forget it. Fine. Just carry on.
And so, look, there's.
Oh, bless Charlie Rowley there. Very, very shocked as you would be. Eamon did return to screen. Watch this.
Welcome back. Good to see you again. Especially good for me to see you again. I am still alive, yes. And they're very wonky wheels on chairs that we've got here. As a matter of fact, we don't really like the chairs full stop, do we?
They're a bit slippy and slidey, aren't they?
They're a bit slippy and slidey, and I've slipped and slid off mine there. Not the first guest to have done so. We've had a few. They have to remain nameless because they're well-known people, but they've hit the floor really badly, quite frightening, and it was a bit of a shock for me because I've had a fall in my bathroom 2 weeks ago, which hospitalised me, and that hit me again right in the back, and really sore.
You okay?
Don't know if it all works or not, but we'll find out. Anyway, Charlie Riley believes that it was some government agent.
Russell, bless him. The Daily Mail reporting GB News bosses are worried if he's going to be able to stay on air. What do you think?
I was on GB News that morning, so I was covering a property story. Funny enough, and I was on just after that. So, yeah, look, it's a horrible thing to happen, and certainly to witness. You could see the look on Charlie's face, couldn't you, in terms of him not knowing what to do. Eamon putting a brave face on it there, I think, in terms of blaming the chair, but. Look, I don't want to talk out of turn here, but if Eamon's talking about, he's also had a fall in his bathroom 2 weeks previously. And of course, look, very famously, I think he's had one, if not two hip operations. There's been paparazzi, or there you go. Look, there's an image right now on screen of him on a walker. So, we, I think, are justified in being a bit concerned about him, in terms of how steady he is on his feet or in his seat, indeed. But look, I would say this. And I'm not just saying this to be sycophantic because we're talking about him, but he is a wonderful and brilliant broadcaster. So, and I know you're not suggesting that we do this here, Dan, but, health notwithstanding, I wouldn't have a bad word said against him, frankly. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And whenever I have been on with him on GB News or talk over the years, he has been an absolute gentleman, a very, very nice individual, which I have to say you can't say of all presenters and celebrities that you encounter.
No, of course. And I will always value the fact that he was prepared to so publicly speak out against Philip Schofield after that ITV cover-up in an interview with me on GB News. It was incredibly powerful. Lois, do you know Eamon?
I don't personally, but do you know what? I hope this is just evidence of his new young lady wearing them out, because at least, because at least he's probably enjoying it. Because I have noticed that he does look a little bit more fragile since he's been with this blonde. But no, joking aside,
Blondes
I have a
can do that,
huge amount
Lois,
of
as you well
respect
know.
for her. Pardon?
Blondes can do that, Lois, as you well know.
Well, but I respect him enormously as a broadcaster, and I wish him well. And I think if anything, if he was to leave GB News, it would be a huge loss for them, because he is such a credible broadcaster with such a long-standing following. And was it right that he mentioned something to do with 5G or something, and that's why he had to issue an apology when he used to present
one of
this
the
morning?
reasons he was put off from Woke ITV is because they considered that he'd taken it too far with some comments in regards to 5G. But, Eamon is quite an open-minded guy. Like, he's interviewed David Icke quite often. I think, actually, his interview with David Icke is the most watched clip on Talk TV's YouTube ever in its history. It certainly
I must admit, I haven't seen it. I will watch it.
Yeah,
Dan, can I just add,
please.
Isn't it a terrible state of affairs in Britain, which is supposed to be the kind of the poster country for all that is free, victor of 2 world wars, Churchill, Thatcher. I'm wearing the T-shirt, by the way.
I love it.
my idol. But what a sad and pathetic state of affairs where we have a broadcasting culture, because of the off-communists, as you brilliantly call them, where we have to be careful what we say as broadcasters. We have to be careful of the wording we use. Do you not just think, and I'm sure you do, that this is just insulting the intelligence of the public? The public know whether it's opinion or straight back news or not, and whether it's Lawrence Fox saying something that some deem inappropriate, or whether it's someone talking about 4G having something to do with, whatever. I mean, the nation are not idiots, Dan. We know. We have a judgment of ourselves where we can say, yes, Eamon, I don't believe that, but thank you. Or, yeah, Lawrence, I think that's inappropriate. We don't need to be told by the state.
And I have to be honest, and I'm not just saying this, because I was absolutely devastated when GB News decided to throw me under the bus to appease Ofcom. Absolutely devastated. I had been a huge part of starting that station. It was a huge part of my life. However, I guess we're coming
doing
up...
this, which is massive,
well,
huge.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up to, I think, 18 months to 2 years. I can't remember, actually, how long ago that horror erupted.
God has a plan, Dan. He has a plan.
Well, I'm free now, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And that would be my message, just to wrap in terms of the headliners, guys, because as I say, there's some really talented men there. Archie Manners, Nick Dixon, Leo Kearse in particular. I want to watch your content when you're not Ofcom regulated. I want to watch your content on YouTube. I want to watch your content on Substack. And I know Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon have actually already launched their own independent platforms, which they were allowed to do alongside their work at GB News. And I am so there for that. And I think they will be massive successes. And I guess in some ways, be happy about the fact that GB News has given you that platform to start with. But now there's a real opportunity for them to do something exciting. So good luck to the headliners. And I always had fond memories because I would come off, my show would finish at 11 and the headliners would come into the studio. And apart from Simon Evans, right, he was a really scary guy. He just would never speak to me, never speak to me. But the others were all absolutely delightful. And I think they're real talents. The show maybe hasn't worked, but I think they will all go on to do really, really exciting things. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.